The airport was buzzing with its usual symphony of rolling suitcases, overlapping announcements, and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine from the cafe tucked beside the lounge. I sat comfortably in the corner, half hidden behind a newspaper, savoring a coffee that was more lukewarm than hot, but better than nothing. My flight to New York was going to be long, but the thought of a first-class upgrade made the day brighter. I could already imagine the soft leather seats, the endless legroom, and the quiet separation from the chaos of economy. For once, the miles I had accumulated from countless business trips were paying me back. That's when I noticed her. She stood out immediately, a storm cloud of entitlement rolling toward the check-in desk. The woman had an air about her. Sharp floral blouse pressed within an inch of its life, oversized sunglasses perched on top of carefully sprayed hair, and a frown so permanent it seemed etched into her skin. Even from across the lounge, I could hear her tone, shrill, commanding, and dripping with indignation. She was snapping at a young couple fumbling with their stroller, berating them for blocking important people. The staff at the gate already looked weary, shifting glances at one another like soldiers bracing for battle. I lowered my newspaper slightly and sighed. I'd seen people like her too many times in my travels. The type who believed the world owed them better treatment than anyone else, and the kind who left chaos in their wake. I shook my head, praying silently to the travel gods that she wouldn't somehow intersect with my flight experience. The universe, however, has an exquisite sense of irony. When the boarding announcement finally crackled over the intercom, she sprang to the front like she'd been shot out of a cannon. The line hadn't even formed yet, and already she was pushing past a man in a wheelchair, barking that she've always boarded first. I have rights, she snapped, slamming her ticket on the counter. I pay my dues on time. I'm not some nobody. The gate agent, a young man with the patience of a saint, smiled tightly and scanned her boarding pass. Ma'am, you're in 23B, City. Her face twisted into disbelief. Excuse me. That can't be right. I specifically requested first class. I need first class. I'm sorry, but this is what's on your ticket, he said evenly, handing it back. That was when her eyes found me. I'd walked up, boarding pass in hand, ready to scan and escape into the comfort of my seat. She noticed the words printed boldly across the papered Seat 2A First Class. Her eyes narrowed, and then came that smirk. The kind of smugness that told me she had just chosen me as her target. That's my seat. Stepping in front of me so suddenly I nearly bumped into her. I blinked, caught between disbelief and amusement. No, it isn't, it's mine. I gestured toward the pass. See. 2A, she waved a dismissive hand as if the facts in front of her were irrelevant. I have a medical condition. My knees can't handle economy. I'm not sitting in the back like cattle while you hog all the luxury. The gate agent interjected quickly, his voice firm but calm. Mom, your seat is 23B. This gentleman is assigned to 2A. Head whipped toward him. Then he should switch with me. Why should someone like him get first class? I deserve it. I've lived in my community for 20 years. I pay HOA dues on time. I'm a leader where I come from. She jabbed her finger toward me again, her voice rising like a siren. Be a gentleman for once. Give me the seat. What kind of selfish person doesn't offer their spot to someone in pain? I could feel eyes of fellow passengers boring into us. Phones were discreetly raised, recording the spectacle. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. People loved drama, and Karen was putting on a show worthy of the front page. I opened my mouth, intending to diffuse the situation. Maybe if I offered to let her board ahead of me, she'd calm down. But before I could, she stamped her foot and crossed her arms, glaring at the gate attendant. I'm not moving. I'm not boarding this plane until I get 30B. It's basically abuse. The gate agent pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly fighting back exhaustion. He'd probably dealt with 3 Karens already that day. But then his expression changed. A small flicker of mischief passing over his face. He lifted the intercom microphone with the most professional smile I'd ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed through the speakers, calm and commanding. Please clear the boarding area for a priority passenger. Escort the pilot. The effect was immediate. Every head in the boarding area turned toward me. The whispers stopped. The phones that had been recording suddenly refocused, catching the moment in wide-eyed awe. People stepped back, making space as though I were royalty. I froze for half a heartbeat, processing what had just happened. Then it hit me. The agent knew me. I'd been a commercial airline captain for decades before retiring, and I still did consulting flights from time to time. My name had been flagged in their system. He wasn't technically lying. I straightened up, slipped my boarding pass into my pocket, and gave a small nod. Thank you, I said, simply playing along. The crowd parted instantly, passengers pressing themselves against the stanchions to let me through. A couple even clapped. The phones were still up, but now they weren't mocking. They were capturing the moment of a so-called pilot walking onto his flight. Karen's jaw nearly hit the floor. She stuttered, face pale, eyes wide with the realization of what had just happened. Wait, he's the pilot. I turned just slightly, giving her the faintest smile. She sputtered, her words fumbling out in broken fragments. But he can't be. He's just... But by then, it was too late. I was already walking down the jet bridge, the crowd closing behind me, her protests drowned out by the buds of amused passengers. The last thing I heard before the door sealed shut was her indignant voice screeching to no one in particular. This isn't fair. I deserve first class, and for the first time that day my coffee didn't taste lukewarm anymore. It tasted sweet. The cabin door closed with a soft thud, sealing in the muted hum of conversation and the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee that lingered in first class. I settled into seat 2A, sinking into the wide leather cushion that hugged my frame like an old friend. The flight attendant leaned down with a warm smile, offering me a glass of champagne before we'd even pushed back from the gate. I accepted, swirling the bubbles while replaying the scene at the boarding gate in my mind. The gate agent's quick wit had been flawless. Escort the pilot. It still made me chuckle under my breath. I hadn't commercially in years, but apparently, my old reputation carried enough weight to silence the loudest voice in the room. And Karen. The memory of her stunned expression was something I would carry with me for months, maybe years. The other first-class passengers were buzzing too. A middle-aged businessman across the aisle leaned toward me with a conspiratorial grin. That was some entrance back there. Nicely handled. I raised my glass in acknowledgement. Can't take the credit. The gate purgeant had perfect timing. He chuckled. Either way, you shut her up. That woman looked she was about to stage a sit-in. I smirked, leaning back as the engines roared to life. But the peace didn't last long. As the plane taxied, a sharp, nasal voice cut through the murmur of the cabin. Even from first class, I could hear her. Karen was in row 23, her voice rising above the chattersly to anyone within earshot. This is unacceptable. My knees are swelling. Do you know what this seat is doing to my back? I should sue. I was supposed to be in first class. I deserve it. A ripple of chuckles passed among the passengers in first class. The businessman across the aisle raised an eyebrow. Sounds like she's not done yet. Not by a long shot. I murmured. The flight attendants kept their composure admirably. They moved down the aisles, securing bags, offering polite reassurances, and ignoring Karen's tirade as best they could. But the longer she went unheard, the louder she became, as though sheer volume might manifest her demands into reality. We lifted to the sky, the engines pressing us gently into our seats. I closed my eyes, savoring the sensation of climbing above the clouds. But peace remained elusive. Not 20 minutes into the flight, a commotion stirred. The curtain separating first class from the rest of the cabin rustled, and there she was, Karen, storming forward like she owned the aircraft. Her cheeks were flushed red with outrage, her hair slightly askew from hours of fussing. She marched right past the curtain, ignoring the no entry sign as if it were merely a suggestion. I need to sit up here, she announced to the first-class cabin, voice carrying like a declaration of war. This is ridiculous. My legs can't take it anymore. Someone switch with me. Now gasps and mutters rippled through the passengers. A man in the row behind me muttered, "Funbelievable," while another shook his head and whispered, "She's lost it." The lead flight attendant was on her in an instant, blocking her path with the grace of someone who had done this dance too many times. "Mom, you need to return to your seat immediately." A Karen's face twisted with indignation. "Don't you ma'am me. I am in pain. My HOA would never treat me this way. I demand a seat up here. This," she waved a hand dramatically toward the spacious cabin, "is where I belong. Make him move." Her finger darted toward me again, accusatory. Venomous. I took another sip of champagne, calm as stone. The attendant's tone didn't waver. "If you don't return to your assigned seat right now, we'll have no choice but to notify the captain. If this continues, the plane will be diverted and security will escort you off upon landing." The cabin fell silent. Everyone was watching, breath held, waiting to see how far Karen would push. For a moment, she looked like she might burst, her lips quivering, fists clenched. Her pride and temper battled with the reality of her situation. "I paid good money this to me. She shrieked money for this flight. I'm an important person. My community respects me." The attendant didn't blink. "Return to your seat. Now." The quiet authority in her voice left no room for negotiation. Finally, with a guttural noise of frustration, Karen spun on her heel and stormed back down the aisle, muttering insults under her breath the whole way. "This airline will hear from me. You'll all regret this. Nobody treats me like this." The curtain closed behind her, and the first-class cabin erupted into quiet laughter. Someone clapped softly. Another passenger whispered, "I thought we'd never get rid of her." The businessman across from me leaned back in his seat, shaking his head. "I almost feel sorry for whoever stuck next to her." I smiled faintly but said nothing. In my years as a captain, I'd seen my share of difficult passengers, but Karen was in a league of her own. She wasn't just entitled. She seemed fueled by a belief that the universe itself should bend to her will. The rest of the flight passed in relative peace, though every so often, I could hear her voice carrying up from the back, still railing against her perceived injustice. I tuned her out, immersing myself in the quiet luxury of first class. The warm meal, the comfortable recline, the view of endless sky out my window. When we touched down in New York, the cabin gave a collective sigh of relief. Bags rustled from overhead bins, seat belts clicked open, and the usual scramble to disembark began. I gathered my things calmly, unhurried, watching the chaos unfold in front of me. Karen was waiting near the door, arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently. As I stepped into the aisle, her eyes locked on me, burning with indignation. "You think you're better than me because you sit up front," she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear. I met her gaze evenly, holding her stare without flinching. "No, ma'am. I think I'm better than you because I don't throw tantrums over assigned seating." Her mouth opened, but before she could fire back, 2 uniformed airport security officers appeared at the gate. They stepped forward with practiced authority. "Mom, we need to speak with you about your behavior on this flight." Her outrage returned in full force. "This is harassment. I did nothing wrong. I have rights," she protested, her voice climbing higher as the officers gently but firmly guided her aside. Passengers streamed past, many snickering, some shaking their heads. Phones were out again, capturing every second of Karen's downfall. I walked into the terminal, the cool air of the airport brushing against my face. Behind me, Karen's voice still echoed, loud, shrill, and unrepentant, as she was escorted away. For the first time in hours, I felt light-free, almost amused. The flight had been long, but in its own way had been worth every mile. Some people never learned, but at least for one evening, the skies had been a little friendlier. And the memory of Karen's fury would fuel more than a few smiles for everyone who had been there to witness it.